Hello, this is Paul Casey. Welcome to the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame video series. Today's special guest is Mr. Patrick Strong, a Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame inductee in 2024. Patrick is also a first-generation Bruce Lee student, beginning his career in the martial arts in Seattle, Washington in the early 1960s. Patrick's going to share a lot of his insights of what Bruce taught him and how it applies to his life now. Hello, Patrick, and welcome to the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame.
Nice seeing you again. I'm doing fine.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. It's good the second time around.
And yourself?
We had a chance to meet up numerous times. We talked on the phone, and you were very gracious. You probably get all kinds of weird phone calls, but I had the great privilege of having somebody speak for me a little bit beforehand. And then you were one of the honorees at this year's 2024 Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame. And as I explained to you, the Hall of Fame represents the martial arts and the teachings that originally came out of Hawaii, and then they grew from there into the mainland. And some of the people that you knew were instrumental in making sure that you were brought into the Hall of Fame, as there's over 14 different style systems and disciplines, including American Kenpo, Kaji Kenpo, Lima Lama, even the arts that derive from that, which would be including the IKCA, which is with Chuck Sullivan, and JKD with one of your teachers. And so now we're going to talk about your background and how you were impacted, influenced by your martial arts experience. You told me that you started off as a boxer, an amateur boxer. Is that correct?
Yes. Not in
Okay.
the circuit. I was just training as a boxer.
Right. And this was up
not in the circuit.
But you were up in the Washington area, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's pick it up from there. What year was it? What were you doing in Washington? And let's see where we go with that. It'd be fun to hear about you.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was in Washington. I went to junior high school in Washington. I went to high school in Washington. I left Washington and came down to California. That was in the mid-60s. While in Washington, just right after high school, I became a lifeguard. And I was a lifeguard on the beaches and whatever. And at the same time, I was boxing at the Cherry Street Gym. At Cherry Street Gym, I had a pro trainer there, and I was boxing. And a friend of mine, John Craig, who was also with Bruce Lee later, we were doing the boxing lessons there. And I started hearing about this fellow that was from China that did Chinese boxing. And I mentioned that to some of the boxers in the gym, some of the guys, and they just laughed. But it came to the point where I decided to go and have a look for myself. So I went up onto Capitol Hill, and right there was the Blue Cross Insurance Building. And that's where the group would be training. They'd be working out in the garage without any cars, and no ring, and no weights, and no focus mitts, no nothing, just human bodies. Right across the street was Ruby Chow's Chinese restaurant. That's where Bruce Lee lived he had a room there. In addition to, he was working as a waiter. Well, I was there in that garage waiting for him to come, and finally he showed up, and he had this huge personality, great looking guy. And he started talking to everybody. And as he was talking, he was having a great time. He just loved what he was doing. He loved martial art. So he started throwing kicks and punches. And boy, I started looking at that. And neither John nor I had never seen anything like that before. His kicks were as fast as a boxer's strike, punch, left jab. Unbelievable stuff. And then what he did after that was just stunning. So, of course, we both signed up right away to become students. That was in the early 60s. Then Bruce used to come to me once in a while down to the beach where I worked as a lifeguard, and we would talk about things there. And of course, we'd talk when we go out to dinner at night, along with the other fellows. And Bruce would talk philosophically. A lot of his study was philosophical, mainly the Wu Wei, meaning it's a Taoist principle, meaning the not doing or letting it happen. And with it, it has a sister tenet, the Wei Wu Wei, meaning the soft and invisible power. Now, Bruce could do certain things. For example, he could sit on a chair and have you sit on the chair and put your hands up like this, and then rock back on the chair So you're just on the rear legs, and then he would push you over. But if he did it, he would sit in the chair, put his hands up like this, rock back on the rear legs, and with all of your strength, you couldn't push that chair over. Okay, now that at an early age, that really had me stumped. And it was not only that, it was other things that he could do. For example, he could do what Aikido does in the unbendable arm. He could stick the arm out so that the hand is on the shoulder. And then what you do, you try to push down on above the elbow with all your strength like that. And he just sits there and holds it. Now, Aikido people do this all the time, and a lot of people do it. It's an interesting trick, but the thing is, it can be used, that kind of strength can be used in real fighting. So meanwhile, then Bruce could do something else though. You put the hand, he put his hand out like this, you can bend it down, but now he just touches you and you can't bend him. He can now sit and do things without touching you and do it and pull them off. And that was just stunning. I didn't understand that at all. Then one day, several years later, a fellow came into town, and I had seen my first karate tournament. It was done in Tacoma, Washington. Joe Louis was there fighting at that time. And there was a fellow, I can't remember his name. He was a black guy with a goatee, and he did very well. He didn't win the tournament, but he did very well. And one day I'm walking up the street in Seattle, and I see a dojo has opened, a karate school. We didn't have anything like that. In those days, there was no Kung Fu, there was no karate. It was just basically judo and boxing. So I go into the school, I meet the guy, it's the same guy that was in Tacoma in the tournament. And he tells me he has a guest coming in from Hawaii. And if I wanted to, I could sit there and stay with him. Well, that guest happened to be the highest ranking man in Aikido. At that time, I think he was an 8th or 9th degree at that time. Cherubic little fellow, handsome, spoke really good English. And so we talked for quite a while, and then he started to demonstrate his art. And the things that he demonstrated stunned me. For example, he would get down and sit on the floor with one leg like he's going to tie his shoe. He would ask me to push him over. Well, I was pretty strong in those days. I was lifting weights, I was an athlete. And I would push him with all of my strength and couldn't even move him. And he's just sitting here like this, tying his shoe. So that, I couldn't believe. So, he could push me with one finger and I'd fall over. I couldn't push him with all of my strength. When I went to the school that night with Bruce Lee, I told Bruce about this, that I had met this fellow in Aikido and some of the things he did. And at that point on, Bruce has started showing us things that he could do. And he said, a lot of these are just, they're just tricks, but they can be used in self-defense. One was that invisible arm. Other things came in and fell under the guise of what he called non-intention. Non-intention was basically the Wu Wei, not doing or letting it happen. In the film Enter the Dragon, if you've seen that, you may recall that when Bruce has this tournament on Hans Island, well, it's before Hans Island, but he's walking along with this Shaolin monk, and the monk asks him to describe his art. Bruce lifts his fist and he says, "I don't hit, it hits all by itself." That's non-intention. And Bruce later wrote in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do that the conscious self is the greatest hindrance to all physical action. So I started working with that years and years ago. I didn't understand it at all. It was just, how can you do something without doing it? How can you do something powerful without using strength? These things made no sense to me at all. But as I stayed with it, I started experimenting with it. By now, Bruce had passed away. I was working with Joe Himes and writing scripts and stuff. Joe Himes was a student of Bruce Lee's, and he was a very close friend of Ed Parker. And it was through Joe that I met Ed Parker. And it was also partially before Bruce, because Bruce said, when you go to California, I want you to look up Ed Parker. So I did, and we became very close friends for the years that followed. Although I'd never trained in Kenpo, I learned a lot of things from Ed and things that I was able to put into my version of the art. But in the meantime, I was working with Bruce Lee's non-intention, which made no sense at all. So I started experimenting with it. I set up a group of people, a couple of them world champions. I set up a group of people, we put the mats down, and we started to work on it and started making discoveries on it. And these discoveries went on for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And what we've discovered in that was amazing stuff, just amazing stuff. So that kind of brings me up to where I am today, having trained in a number of martial arts, putting all the ideas together, but putting it in line with Bruce Lee's philosophy of non-intention. Now that's a lot to swallow,
That is
but I can demonstrate
amazing.
some of that.
And amazing. I mean, you could spend a lifetime and not even get through half of the stuff that you're talking about. This is pretty interesting. Let me ask you this: when you first started back there in Washington, let's backtrack just a little bit for some of the people. Who are some of the teachers or the students that you met in the early classes of when you were training at Bruce's school?
Okay, now that was way back in the 60s. So there aren't a lot. There was Tony Garchor, there was John Craig, Jesse Glover. He was the first student that Bruce ever taught. James Demile at that time, he was right there with Jesse a lot of times. And then he went and started doing his own thing. And so there was Doug Palmer. Doug Palmer went to Hong Kong with Bruce. And when he went to Hong Kong with Bruce, Bruce told him, don't tell anyone that I'm teaching. Don't tell anyone about Jun Fan Gung Fu, named after himself, right? The little dragon, Jun Fan. He didn't call it Wing Chun. He'd go to the Wing Chun school. He took Doug to the Wing Chun school, but Doug was not permitted to talk about doing anything that was around Wing Chun. Because in those days, you just didn't, the Chinese didn't teach the whites. They didn't teach it to the outside. A few of them did, but generally, no, it's forbidden. So that was all in the early 60s. So those were some of the original guys. There was Lamson Chen. There's people that you've never heard about because they've kind of left the art, or really they're doing other things now. They've been out of it for a long time. Then Bruce came to California, and in California, he had met James Lee. James Lee was in San Francisco. He was a hard hand specialist. Bruce once told me a story. In fact, he laughed like crazy when he was telling the story, that he and James were in San Francisco, and James pulled up next to a car to back into a space. Another car came and took the place, went right into it. James Lee got out of the car. Bruce Lee got out of the car. He didn't know what was going to happen. James Lee goes out of the car. He talks to the fellow, and he says, I was going to park here, and you stole my place. And the guy was a big guy. It was a small car, but a big guy. And the big guy said a few things to James, which I won't repeat. And James turned around and blam, hit the hood of his car and caved it in. Now, James Lee used to break bricks and rocks and everything else. He was a hard hand specialist. Bruce said he just laughed and laughed. The guy jumped in his car and drove away as fast as he could.
I would have
So Bruce was then with James. And when Bruce met Linda and eventually married her, at the time that they got married, they moved down to San Francisco, my understanding. And they actually lived in James Lee's home with him for quite a while. Then Bruce would come up to Seattle, go down to California, come up to Seattle, go down to California, and then finally he got into Southern California. And there he met a lot of the karate people. Now, years later, I started training with Hawkins Chung. Hawkins Chung was Bruce Lee's training partner in Hong Kong, close friend. They trained together with Yip Man. And it's strange what Hawkins was telling me. He would be with Yip Man, who was an older man at that time, who could move around his students that were younger and stronger with ease. And they would watch Yip Man. They would watch him. Bruce would watch him from the legs down. Hawkins would watch him from the waist up. After the class, they would get together and compare what they've learned. The next time, Bruce would watch from the waist up and Hawkins from the waist down. And they would get together and discuss what they saw. They were trying to figure out why Yip Man, an older, thinner man, was so strong and could overpower bigger people so easily. So I continued with Bruce on and off. From that time on, I moved down to California. And then I'd go up to Seattle, and if we emerged at the same time, then we would train together. If he wasn't there, I'd train with Taki Kimura, who would really kind of, he was the head instructor under Bruce Lee. And Taki was a Japanese, of course, Bruce was Chinese. But Bruce had no prejudice at all. We had people of every nationality, brown, black, white. It didn't matter what it was. He didn't care. He was above all of that. He simply loved the people for what they were and how they were, how truthful they were, how honest they were. All of those things is what Bruce Lee was attracted to. So I came to California much later.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
So I came to California. Yeah, I came to California much later. And when I came to California, Bruce had already been down here. And I decided that I wanted to sharpen my kicks and stuff a lot more. The Wing Chun kicks are fine. In fact, in Wing Chun, we had something that doesn't live today in Jun Fan. We had, at our school, we had a Northern style kicking form. I don't even know the name of it, but that's not practiced anymore at all. We had to do a lot of Tai Chi because Bruce's father was a Tai Chi man. Bruce trained with a fellow who was a master at Tai Chi. And before Bruce came to the United States, right before he came, he started training with a man of 5 different systems, a Kung Fu man with 5 systems. Hawkins Chung is the one who told me about this. He would go to the training himself, but the man had a dog, big dog, and Hawkins was afraid of the dog, so he stopped going. But Bruce learned some things from 5 different arts before he came to California. So in his Jun Fan, we had to do a lot of things from that. We had a long form. I don't even know what style the form was, but it was the kind of form that you had movements like this, big movements. We did the kicking form, which we had to do, which I've never seen anything like it since. We had to do the Tai Chi, and we had to do the Wing Chun. The Wing Chun was based more on the principles, although we did Wing Chun exercises and stuff. He never showed the whole art. So years later, when I came to California, I wanted to learn the things that Bruce hadn't taught, at least hadn't taught me. And so I went to a Wing Chun fellow, picked up a few things there, went to Hawkins Chung. And by the time I got to Hawkins Chung, I already had a black belt in Taekwondo. And I trained in some other arts as well, and smatterings of arts. But now I'm training with Hawkins Chung. And with Hawkins, who was Bruce Lee's training partner in Hong Kong, very, very close friend, Hawkins had me in the advanced class, and I was doing the simple things like the Silam Tao, the Wing Chun first form. And Hawkins said, "You're doing it wrong." And I said, "Well, what do you mean I'm doing it wrong? I know the whole form." Well, what was wrong was the stance, the real Wing Chun stance and everything that went with it. It's an amazing stance, but it's the same stance that's used in Goju Karate. And but Bruce, if you look at pictures, you'll see fellows standing doing the Silam Tao in kind of regular stances or something, but you'll see Bruce in the Wing Chun stance. So that was the beginning, and then Hawkins turned around and made me come back into the beginners class. Here I was well-seasoned martial artist, but I had to go back to the beginners because now I had to relearn the Silam Tao form. In the meantime, I had already sparred with some of their advanced students, and that was no problem. But now I had to go back to the Silam Tao form, and in that Silam Tao form, I learned a lot of things that I didn't know before. And then that moved into the Chum Kyo, and then that moved into the Buji form. Hawkins explained himself, because Hawkins was a small man, he explained himself of being of the Chum Kyo character, the second form character, because it knows how to handle pressure and strength, and he was a small man. He told me that Bruce Lee was of the third form character, but at that time, Bruce didn't know the third form, only pieces of it, not the whole thing. But the third form character is the Buji form. It strikes from the out. Well, when you strike out, you leave this open. So it's called a high risk form, or he's known as a high risk form to some Kung Fu people. But that was Bruce Lee's character. So when Bruce came to California, and again from Hawkins Chung, he came down here in Southern California, and he wanted to get together with karate guys because he saw that these karate guys were really big, strong, and fast. So he got together with all kinds of guys. He became close with Bob Wall. He became close with Joe Louis. They trained together, Chuck Norris. They all worked out together, a bunch of other people as well. At the time, I was actually living with Bong Su-han. Bong Su-han was the highest ranking master in the world in Hapkido. And so I was very close to Ed Parker. And I put the two of them together in a little project, and they got to know each other quite well. And Bong Su-han was telling me that one time at Warner Brothers, he showed Bruce Lee his kick. Now, Bong Su-han kick differently than anybody else. And his story, now if I can take a moment, he and a few of the guys in Korea would go up along the side of a mountain and they would practice and they train. But there's always on a boulder, there was this man standing there, an old man watching them. One day Hawkins goes up to the man and he says, can I help you? What are you doing? And the man says, I'm watching. And so it turned out that Hawkins got to know the man, Bang Soo-han got to know the man, and the man started teaching Bang Soo-han the kick. Not the regular Hapkido kick, but the monk kick that he used. And that kick was more of a arcing kick. And that became the thing that, same thing that Bruce Lee was teaching. He was teaching that type of kick, but now he had met Bang Soo-han, and he changed the kick just a little bit. Now, Bruce was very good at that. They say that he stole techniques. He didn't steal techniques. What he would do is to look at another art like Kenpo or hree or something like that. He would see something that he really liked, something that fit into his set of principles. And he would see that like he saw Bang Soo-han's kick, and he would go away and he would practice it. And he would practice it, applying the principles that he knew of non-intention, of Wu Wei, the soft invisible power. And then he'd come back and he showed Han the kick, and Han felt the kick was almost as good or not better than his own. Well, Bruce did this quite often with Bob Wall, who was 7 times national champion at that time. He became very close to Bruce because he was in Bruce's movies. Bob Wall was the fellow that Bruce Lee fights in Enter the Dragon, and who eventually kills. He's the bad guy. Well, Bob had traveled with Bruce, did movies with him, and spent a lot of time with him, went to see him in Hong Kong while he was making the Hong Kong movies and stuff, has a whole collection of everything that's Bruce Lee. He's done documentaries and stuff about Bruce Lee, loves Bruce Lee. He's a real street fighter. He's with Chuck Norris. He had a studio for a long time, and that studio was with Joe Louis. Joe Louis sold out his portion of it, and Chuck Norris stepped in, and the two of them became partners. So Bob Wall, from Bob, I learned a lot of things about Bruce that I didn't know, because that was in later years. But with Bob, he was the kind of guy, he was so good, you don't talk to him about martial arts. You know, I mean, he's been there, he's so endowed in it and stuff. So one day I had a big case with a product that I was working with, and I brought it in, and I didn't want to talk to him at his home. I didn't want to talk to him about martial arts. Instead, I said, Bob, do you have any weights around here? He said, well, yeah, out on the porch there. So we go out on the porch, and he's got a dumbbell rack and some other things there. And the dumbbell rack goes up to about 50 pounds, 40, 50 pounds, 45, something like that. And it's a rack of these weights. And I said, well, Bob, do you have any trouble lifting it? Are your shoulders okay? Can you lift those? Yeah, I can do it. So when he lifts the weight, he has to drive it up. You know, he has to drive the weight up. I didn't want to talk to him about martial arts, but I did want to show him something. So I said, well, I'm going to do the weight. I'm not warmed up. Okay, but I want you to watch what I'm going to do. So I pick up the weight and I do 14 reps with it. It was about 45 pounds or so. I have 15 reps, and I came down the side. I said, there, I've done that side. I have a bad shoulder. I'll watch. And I did another 15 reps. Faster than the first 15. Well, Bob just could not understand that. That was beyond his thinking, way beyond. He wanted to know how to do it. I wasn't interested in showing him how I did it. But it's something very, very simple. And it's very, very simple. It's like the speed. I'm fast, but I'm 81 years old, and it can't be expected to be too fast. But when I use these principles, for example, can you see me now?
Yes, sir.
This is 3 punches. That's 3 punches. See, that's 3 punches. And I'm not warmed up or anything else, but if I go like this, that's 5 punches at full power, because it's in convergence. It's pulling my body into perfect alignment. Versus if I moved my body first and then punch, it'd be in divergence, which can never be in personal alignment. It's like you take a car, if you push the car, it's like this. We've all done that, right? But if you want to pull a car out of a ditch, you hook up a line and you pull it out of the ditch. It's in perfect alignment. So if your hand moves before your body, your whole body goes into perfect alignment. Perfect. You don't have to try to get in line. You don't have to balance. You don't have to do anything. The mere fact that you did this pulls your body into perfect alignment. The terms become physics. The demonstration that I just did on the punch is not a major muscle contraction. That takes time. You have to send the message from the brain down through the nervous system into the muscle to fire. It happens in a fraction of a second. But Bruce said you can be faster, very fast, but if you're not instant, you're not fast enough. You're not instant. If you're doing that, you're not instant. So the thing you have to do is you have to bypass this so that the body intelligence is doing that. So we use physics. Now, in Bruce's case, what I do is I've given names to a lot of things he did, and also I've developed things based on what he did, and I've taken into different directions and a little further. But the terminology I use is physics, basically physics. Potential energy. Potential energy is like gravitational potential energy. When the keys fall off the edge of the table, as Bruce would say, using it as a demonstration, when the keys, you move the table, the keys fall off, they don't think to fall off. They don't prepare to fall off, they just fall off. Well, he said, when you walk through a bamboo forest, be very careful, because when you press the bamboo and you let go, bam, it hits you in the head. He says, it doesn't prepare to hit you in the head. It doesn't think to hit you in the head. It just hits you in the head. That's because of the rings, is its integrity. It has the flexibility into it. There's no brain, no mind attached to it. He would talk about the water behind a dam. He said, here you've got the dam with the dam wall with all the water inside. He says, suddenly a hole breaks out. Water just goes through. Another hole, another hole, another hole, another hole, another hole. He says the water doesn't have to look for the holes. It just goes through. So it's the same thing when he said, I don't hit. It hits all by itself. In other words, a lot of people don't quite understand that, but what he's really saying is, I don't hit with this. The body intelligence hits with that. Now, for martial artists, we've been training at something for a long time, possibly, a very, very long time in many cases. It's all built into our body. The body, muscle memory, everything that it has knows how to do everything. It knows everything that you have. The thing that slows you down is this. Bruce Lee said in his Tao of Jeet Kune Do, the conscious self is the greatest hindrance to all physical action. The conscious self, the intention, is the hindrance to the physical action, non-intention. That's why you don't intend to hit somebody. I do this, that happens. If I go like this, if I do this here, he's been hit. I don't even look at him. I can take a set of keys and put them here like this, and with a ring on it, and pick them up that way. That's the way I'd pick them up. But if I go like this, without even looking at it, I'll pick it up perfectly every time with total relaxation. Well, we were able to take that kind of knowledge and put it into the University of North Dakota, and where we're doing a study on Parkinson's disease. Because people with Parkinson's and other disabilities, these things that we martial artists know, can be taught to these people to give them confidence, to get them interested in doing things, to get them up out of their chair and up again to something, doing it and keeping it, again, building skills in it, which last a lifetime.
Let me ask you a few questions. I know that the audience is, I'm mesmerized. I'm speechless. So that's rare. I usually interject sometimes, Patrick, as you've probably have noticed in our conversations we've had in the past. I want to examine three things because everybody's fascinated with this. When you first started with Jun Fan Gung Fu in Washington, was it a structured school? Did you guys wear uniforms? Or because I know that Lee was not a traditionalist. I mean, in certain ways, yes, but he was forward looking or thinking. And I know that's where you're at with it. At some point, they discard wearing a uniform? Because there are some photos with him wearing that. Did you have to wear things like that?
Well, he would normally just be in street clothes. But from time to time in the school and stuff, he'd end up wearing his Kung Fu uniform with his shoes and stuff, but rarely. His whole thing was based really on real fighting at that time. What he was really interested in is the real fight. Now, all of the students, all of us, we were, I hate to call us guinea pigs, but he was testing everything with us. He was learning as he was teaching. And he had all kinds of body styles and shapes and skills and everything to work against. And of course, nobody could compete with him. He was so fast and so smooth. You know, he could, we eventually moved into a school out in the University District. It was a very large school, but it was a long way from this wall to that wall. I've never seen anybody who could just go step like an insect all the way across and back Never seen anyone go that fast. In the movie Enter the Dragon, you'll see where he's getting off the boat to get on Hans Island. He gets off the boat and he takes the first step. It's like he has helium balloons he's holding on to, or in his shoes or something. He's so light, so agile. And so that's the Bruce Lee that I saw. In those days, there were no focus mitts, there were no punching bags, there was nothing. It was a big garage. A big
So you
garage,
actually,
and
there was,
we'd be there
so
on
you
a
engaged
Saturday or
in
Sunday.
combat is what you're telling me. You actually put hands on hands. Was there a bit of striking that you
Yeah.
felt? I mean, I would think with control though.
Well, yeah, there was. We would do everything with hands on hands, you know, because you have to develop the sensitivity when you touch. When you touch here, the whole body has to reshape and stuff because your center of gravity and all that. He didn't explain it that way in those days, but that's what he was doing. So everything you did, you had to touch. You touch, you'd be blocked. You'd touch, you'd be blocked. You'd be everything you did, and you would punch and block for the most part at the same time instead of block, punch. It'd be boom one time. Another thing he did that people may find interesting in boxing and in martial arts, the structure is your hands are like this. It's coming from the outside in. The triangle is this way. In Bruce's art, the triangle is from here out. See, it's just the opposite. So if one's coming in, one intercepts the other. The inside intercepts this. That's why you can block and punch at the same time. It's very difficult to if this is getting in the way. He also, a very important thing, everything that Bruce did with the hands was just basically the same thing every single time because he's starting from here. His triangle is going this way. So what he does is, unlike in a lot of martial arts, you have to develop a really, really fast identity speed. You have to see what the guy's going to do to know what he's going to do. You have to have an instinct of what he's going to do. But if he shoots a right hand, you do an inside block, or do you do an outside block, or do you do an upper block? Or do you do what kind of block do you do? That's choice reaction. If he comes into here, that's about, if you do that, that's choice reaction. Bruce didn't believe in choice reaction. He was in single reaction, one thing for everything. So now what happens is no matter what you do, I'm doing one thing. Okay, I'm doing one thing. This hand is already there, one thing. But what would happen if you would have shot a low punch in? I've released it here, it's coming in, but this hand's going first. It drags this hand, which now has more time, and it just flows in here, all in a fraction of a second, without thinking about it. You don't think about it, but it's single choice reaction, faster than double choice reaction. But Bruce, he was onto those things. He was very philosophical. He had a lot of books on philosophy. What he would do is he would take notes and he'd write on the edges of books like this, and then he would go out and buy another book. Instead of throwing that book away, he'd buy another book and he'd write at the same place new notes on it. He wanted it originally at the time that he was thinking of it. He'd write new. He had about 1,000 books. But Bruce was a very, very bright guy. People don't think of him like that, but he was very bright. And he was hugely steeped in the philosophy. But when he came to California, the philosophy kind of got away because he's now interested in something else. He was interested in, well, Hawkins told me, he said he was learning karate to beat the karate man. See, his thing
Oh yeah,
was different.
your time with him up in,
It wasn't the kind of thing that,
I'm sorry. I was going to say
Go
that
ahead,
in your time up there, was it a structured class? For example, in the early days, as it seems to me, Lee was trying to explore the possibilities of combat. And as you said, he had different size students and abilities and whatnot. Did you guys practice? I saw that there's a lot of photos where he has his hands up and he's doing what is some people call sticky hands. Did you ever work on things like that?
he had the Wing Chun principles, doing Wing Chun things. Like I mentioned before, he also had trained in a lot of other arts, and he kind of mixed everything together. I mean, you had to do Tai Chi. Why do you have to do Tai Chi when you're doing Wing Chun? Well, because Tai Chi has a softness. It has a softness side to the whole thing. It flows the whole way. Where Wing Chun, boom, boom, boom. You know, it's a different kind of thing. So he was really, he wasn't fully accomplished in Wing Chun, but he didn't know all the forms. He didn't know all the third form yet. knew about half of it in the beginning of the Chum Kido form, but he knew parts of it. And he applied those things to real combat. So when he would teach, it was a structured class. When we walked in, a lot different than today. When we walked in, you know, you bow before you went in, you give a salute before you walk in, before you cross the mat. We go for meditation. The meditation exercise, I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 5 minutes. But for 5 minutes, you had to meditate. You don't do that anymore. But to him, that was very important. And how you meditated. So that just the meditation principle and how you do it was a part of the class. Then after that, you turn around and you line up the two lines facing somebody. You gone through some punches and stuff like that and kick stuff. Now you start using the techniques against somebody. You don't do them against there. Everything is against somebody. So somebody comes up and you're going for a stance like this. Now today you see a lot of guys and stuff. They stand like this with this hand back. Well, this hand's the guarding hand. It's supposed to stop, like a strike to the throat. But you can go to most people and you can just crush it. But if you do a little tiny thing, you can take 2 or 3 people, they can't move that hand. It's the same hand you use in Kenpo, right? So it's just a matter of knowing what to turn off and what to turn on, joint selection, to make that more powerful, and what you have in your mind. For example, if I'm here and the physical therapist says, Pat, find your center of gravity. Well, I go like this. There, I think I've got it. Okay, now watch. I'm going to do something else. And here it is. Watch this. That's my center of gravity. See, I didn't do it. The body went to the center of gravity that was there, right? Because what I did then was I pictured in my mind, my spine became a black bar, straight iron bar that comes down like this. When that happens, when that becomes like that, the intercostal muscles in your hips clamp together. When that happens, you develop an abdominal pelvic pressure in your abdomen. Okay, that's all stored energy. Okay, which can now be used into kinetic energy, but you learn to get the feel of that as it's coming in like that. So he had the details like that, but he didn't have the language to explain it. He wouldn't talk about intercostal muscles. He wouldn't talk about abdominal pelvic pressure. He would show you the technique. It took me years to figure it out. But he would show you the technique and you do it. Now you face another guy from here. He doesn't hold his hand like this, as I was saying. He holds it like this. See? So that when you go to push against his hand, you have this. But this right here is a triangle. This right here is a triangle. This here is a triangle. Your hip to your ankle, when your knee is bent, is a triangle. From here to here is a triangle. So you become, in your stance, you become a series of triangles. This is what triangles, what they build bridges for strength and everything. All of that is fine, and you build that and you get very good at it. But there's another room available. And that other room is how to move this out of it so the body intelligence is doing it, not you. See, I don't hit. If I hit, it's that. This is all tight. The sternomastoids were tightened up like that. It's in here. I snap it back. All of that happened, right? If I wanted to strike like this and then come up, not with an elbow strike like that, but an elbow strike that comes from the inside out like this, I would never do that. Although all left-hand people are like this, that's the gait right there. But nobody would ever do that, because to do this tightens up all these stabilizer muscles in the body, all these muscles around the core and back. It's too slow. It's too slow, so it's not realistic. But if you use potential energy into kinetic energy and a different thought in your mind, this is that same movement right now. And look at the thumb. The thumb is down, which means the elbow came all the way up. What it would do to a head is unthinkable. Mm-hmm. But it happened in a fraction of a second.